spots of air epoxy. And you can see how quickly you're done. That's how that material sands out. A couple little spots we had in the back here. That whistling's got to go, Chicky. He thinks it's springtime and he's looking for a girlfriend. I'm your girlfriend. Get. Listen to him singing. What's that all about? Hey! Think you're a movie star? Anyway, I just wanted to show one or two little spots here before we start setting it down. You have something you'd like to say to the camera, Chicky? That fills that in really nice. Quiet! You have something you want to say to the camera? Well, I'm trying to say is that Chicky has something that we'd like to say to you. What do you want to say to the people? He needs a girlfriend. If anybody out there has a female pet Oriole, put him in a box and send him to Wendy. Come on, Chicky. Oh, I'm going to kill him. Alright, we're ready to cut this back piece out, and I want to carefully figure out exactly how I want to do this. In fact, what I'll do is I'll cut it out undersized and then work up to the line. I'll leave it plenty undersized, in fact. Chicky, will you stop crying? Chicky, there are lots of women in bars. Listen to him. It's unbelievable. He is convinced that I'm his girlfriend. Chicky, stop it. I have a wife. She doesn't like that. She's a jealous wife. You have anything you want to say to the people? Watch, now I'll fly away. Get. You ever hear of monogamy, Chicky? You ever hear about that? Okay, now the last little bit, I'm going to cut this piece out too. I'm going to have to Zonasaw that out, I think. What's going to happen now is, let's see how this cuts with a Zonasaw. Guess I'm going right through formats. One thing is for sure, and even Les agreed the other day, this is going to be the most rigid body. It's between all the places that are sealed and formed, there's no way you could bend this. This is like a baseball bat. Now, the rest that goes up to the line, I'll take the other side off. I'll do that with a Dremel tool. What I need to do is get a perfectly flat surface, and I'll block sand that in. I need this diameter to be the diameter of the stab, so I left a little material on there, get this tape off later, so that when I put the stab in here I'll get as tight a fit as possible. I also need to get a radius in the back that'll match the radius of the stab. Any straight lines I can just make straight. Once I get all these edges ground in and get in nice, oh, it's hurt. Quiet! You're interrupting a very important TV show. Anyway, getting all these edges and angles straightened out. Once that's done, I'll be ready to make up this, hopefully ready to make up the stab mount. That it'll last a little bit if I take a piece of sandpaper, sanding stick, and just the edge rough. What it allows me to see is how accurate I've gotten against the line. And that'll last a little bit of material. Oh, I'm gonna kill him. Quiet! This is not dial a date. Actually worked pretty well as far as defining these edges for us. And now I need to get this edge nice and flat to block sand these all in ultimately. I want to get as many of these take-apart features one right on top of the other, because to build any take-apart plane, even if you made a take-apart cardinal, it really wouldn't matter. The features, and we also have the video on how to do this from the bottom, and now we have one from the top. Well, it's going to make I hope, something that'll be very helpful when somebody actually wants to go make a take-apart plane. Okay, the rest of it, this is the line that really matters. The rest of this is just cosmetic. Once this is all cleaned up, we'll be ready to make the bulkhead. Anything else. Now that that's all squared up, I want to double check that I haven't moved, because don't forget we put this on and that creates a little bit of stress or tension. Let me line these up and make sure, just a little verification, we haven't moved anything. Okay, that's relatively good. We also, it's a critical thing now when we set this piece of plywood in that it's 90 degrees to the center line. We're going to make a little piece of plywood, a pattern up. I'll make a pattern out of balsa wood, then make some 1/4 inch square pieces that have a little curve, so I have a bigger gluing footprint here. This is getting kind of thin. Then when this piece is totally done, then what I'm going to have to figure out how to do, I'm going to have to figure out my bolt pattern, because this is where it's going to get tricky. I need to get the blind nuts in after that piece. I guess I can come in through the back. I need to get the blind nuts in that piece of plywood once I line up the tail. Yeah, I guess the easiest way is just come in through the back. We can break these formers out after that. You always have to think of it. It's funny how the one thing you don't think about. Okay, so the first piece, I just had to swap a battery out. Here's the piece of scrap balsa, and we need to cut first and cut it to length so we can make a pattern up. Now let's just see if we can flip this. Get an accurate pattern here. And this will be minus the thickness of the carbon. So I'll make it just a little bit oversized. I'm just thinking getting in those blind nuts. We had a way of doing it previously. What I did, I glued the blind nut to a piece of like a cap strip and then slid it in under here and let it pick it up. So that we will be able to get in there. The other choice I had is where we put the rudder on. I can cut some holes up here, get the blind nuts in through there before we mount the rudder. Okay, so that should be roughly what the pattern is, and take away the thickness of the carbon, and that should be a good place to start. Now here's where revisiting some of the things you've already done in the past really seems to pay. One of the things that I did, the very first plane I made that was a take-apart plane, I made this out of real plywood, which is about much heavier anyway. and never drilled any lightning holes in, and thought, for some reason I was thinking, oh, that's going to be so strong, my God, that's got to be solid. Well, then when I made the second one, I made it at a light ply. I said, geez, I used to check the bone, gee, nothing ever happened. Then the third one I did, I cut lightning holes in it. But it's very important, in this case, to get the grain going side to side, the primary grain of this wood. So I can see that isn't going to fit there. I'm trying to use up a piece of this wood that So I know ahead of time that I can cut some lightning holes in this, and I know ahead of time that I want the grain going in this direction, and I know it's okay to use light ply. So those are the three things or four things that, as you evolve a take-apart system, and that's what hopefully the videos would help, is that you can skip those first four planes and go right into the lightest, best system. And the take-apart on this has certainly never been a problem. And it's light ply 1/8 inch, and it's got lightning holes in it. Now granted, they're not big gigantic holes, but that's just one of the scenarios that as a take-apart system evolves, no matter how you do it, even though this one uses the bottom of the fuselage, I don't think it'll make a lot of difference if you use the top. And to be realistic, if it doesn't break on the B-25, what plane is it going to break on? Certainly hasn't broken with a 91 4-stroke, hasn't broken with a twin engine, hasn't broken with a tuned pipe. So that must mean we have a good chance of success and that our take-apart things are evolving the way they should without failures. Purposely made this oversize. We also need to figure out how much of a curve we're going to put in it. It's a little bit bigger in the front than in the back. So the first thing I need to do to get this fit right just see how much extra it is. Okay. 1/64 of an inch. So I need to take off, and I can do this on the belt sander. I need to take off about a 1/64 of an inch, maybe a little more, maybe a 32nd, and start getting, see how this part is curved? I have to start building that curve in. So what I'll do on a belt sander is just start to bend that curve in. Right, how much I want that curve to be on the bottom. Well, I can go fit this up, see if that's enough of a curve. Try to take into account how much of a curve I need. But then I want to run those little stringers of balsa along the bottom. Hey, I just thought I'd mention something funny. I had to go to the dentist yesterday, and our dentist retired after, 1,000 years of being in business. I go to the new dentist. Karen found this new dentist who's supposed to be a great dentist. And, like 1-800-DENTIST. And I go into his office and say hello, shake hands, tell him what I do for a living, what a great guy I am, and yada, yada, yada. And I notice on the right where you would be sitting in front of you is this little table, and he's got a little DVD player, maybe about this big, and he's playing a movie while he's working on my teeth. And I asked him, I said, is that there for my benefit? Like, am I supposed to be watching this 10 minutes of some DVD? I don't even know what DVD I'm watching. Honest to God, no kidding. This dentist has a DVD player right on the table where he's got the tools and the pens and things that instruments of torture. So I was thinking, as I left, I mentioned to him, I said, one of my favorite DVDs is The Little Shop of Horrors. Maybe he could get that one and we could watch Steve Martin doing dental work next time I'm there. Somehow I don't think he's going to go for it though. Anyway, funny story. Now that looks like it fits just very close. It's a little on the minus side, in fact, which is okay because we're going to put a little strip of balsa, those 1/4 inch square pieces there. That'll be the next step. Well, after a lot of fiddling around, a little dressing this off, I finally got this to where I'm happy with it. And I've got that curve on both sides started. I've got a nice butt joint here because I want to transfer the strength of the part up through there. Now the next step for this whole operation is going to be I got to get these two little, maybe some 1/4 inch square balsa, triangulate it so that I have a bigger footprint here. I want to look for a bigger footprint on this. I can take a piece of this. It's really just scrap. Just want to make up some 1/4 inch square little pieces. That'll probably be enough right there. So I may as well just put these parts on full size. And I can carve them once they're in place. I can take that curve, and I'm going to have to do that relatively slowly, I'm sure, to get a nice tight fit. I want to just dress all these edges off nice and straight and then start putting that curve in. I just want to get a rough idea of how much of that material is going to have to come off, actually quite a bit. Now I can take a little bit off at a time, just start to put a little bit of a curve in until this plugs in like a cork in a bottle. And you can see how much more I have to go. Trying to get a feel for how much of that has to come off. Well, we'll just keep taking little slices off until we've got a nice footprint. I want this to be a whole glue surface if I can get it. Now as you get down to the very bottom of this fit, you try to pick up where the high spots are. You can see we're getting down to the very last little bit. And as I look in here, I can kind of get the idea I need more off the top. And I need little ice shavings now. I don't need big cuts. So I would like to get sometimes doing one of these fits can take a couple hours, but once you have it right, and I don't want to fill it with glue either, I want it to be relatively tight fit. Like I said, I think I'll answer the phone. We're getting there though. Now this last little bit, looks like we'll just hit that with a sanding block a few times. You can see how much we're out. Don't want to force it down, but it's perfect up in the front and sticking up in the back. So we might just need to take a couple of swipes with the sandpaper here, and we'll be ready to fit this in. Sometimes these fits, they get so tedious, but when they're right, it's a thing of beauty. Just a little tight, and it's tight in the back, not in the front, and you can see where it's hitting right around the corner. And sometimes you just have to whizzle away at it.
sometimes that's the hardest thing to convince people, is to take the time to do some of these fits right. When you look at a plane that's already built and you see big thicknesses of glue everywhere and filler, and you wonder why didn't you just spend a little more time fitting these parts. Now this looks like we're real close, and I don't want to get it undersized and have to fill it with glue. I'd like it to be a press fit if possible. That should be ready to install. You know, I carefully got that in there with secondary bonding resin, used the tape to squeeze it together. I'm just going to let that sit overnight because I want to make sure that bond and that everything there is as solid as can be. There's no room for error there. So we'll come back to this tomorrow. Once that's in place, check everything again, and then go on to the next step. Alright, today I want to see if I have a good joint here. I'm pretty sure I do. This was sitting up by the heating vent all night, so it should be nice and solid. The first time you ever glue anything with that secondary bonding resin, you just can't believe how strong it is. Okay, now I guess from this point on I can get rid of this tape back here. That's the next thing. I'm done with this alignment. And now the next thing is going to be, I have to start fitting up the tail. And that's going to be, again, I say this over and over again, but it's going to be one of these labor-intensive things. And I want it to start early in the morning and have the better part of a day to do it. I don't want to be starting to do this 10 o'clock at night when I'm tired, or after Karen's gone to bed and whatever, and I'm just tired. I need 2 cups of coffee when I'm going to do this kind of stuff. So the first thing is I'll start by getting all this tape off. And get the tail. And I guess what we have to do is bolt the wing in first. There's several things I have to make. I have to make up a little piece of balsa wood that takes up for the dihedral in the tail before I can even fit it. Quiet, you still mating me? He loves me. Here's a quick funny story. I was just here. I went over carrying a couple of boxes past the table and hit the end of the fuselage and knocked the fuselage right on the floor. Just point blank, dropped right on the floor. And I didn't even look back to see if it was damaged. Now what would happen? If this was the B-25 fuselage, there's got to be a dent in it somewhere. Oh, and I'm always getting asked these questions. I mean, from the jealous people of the world, and I don't know why they ask this, but why do you build a plane out of carbon fiber? Well, that's the answer there. It's because I'm clumsy. But anyway, it does make up for a lot of clumsiness. Now what I have to do with the tail here, I have to find the exact center. Just have to take off a little bit of the silver finish and find that center line. Just like a lot of people that have never built a plane and finished the wing and tail in silver, the first time they do one, and they're amazed that, wow, that's easy. Wow. Okay, so we found our center line. Now I have to figure a way of referencing on. The horn is the center back here. I have to make a little mark so I know where the center is. In fact, let me see. I'm not going to be able to do this the way it is. I have to I didn't allow for this. I have to cut a little bit of material off back here, make this like an angle. That's one thing good when you make a wood model, you don't need a $60 pair of scissors too, so I guess there's 2 sides to everything. Okay, but this is now one of the reasons I wanted to start this early in the day, is I do not want to be tired, I don't want to be grumpy. And Chicky thinks I'm always grumpy anyway. This is going to be a very labor-intensive thing. This is not going to be 5 minutes and we're done. Even though it might look like that on video, because a lot of this just gets boring and redundant, I don't bother videotaping it. Let's spin this around and see if we've got a decent fit up here. And that looks like Well, so you can see right here, we got to take some more material out. This side is okay. That side needs a little more material out. A lot of little back and forth things. I was having a nightmare the other night that I got this whole thing done and I had the tail on the wrong way. Okay, so because of the dihedral angle, this gets to be there's going to be a lot of little things we have to take into account here that normally with a flat tail. Okay, we have our fits real nice. Let's see if we got that. And that looks decent. Now we gotta make sure we have this right on center. Carefully measured this out and have exactly the center line. Then with a little 90-degree triangle, drew that. Now that's going to give me the first part of this measurement. Nothing can be right if that isn't on center. And now I'm going to have to do little clearance fits to maintain that on center. In other words, if the whole thing fits, but it's off one side or the other, or if it's off this way or this way, it's not going to be right. So that's job one, is to keep that fit right up there as we measure everything else. Now I can see I need some more clearance back here. I need about a 1/64 of an inch back here. Really never a big deal. With carbon fiber, you just get out your ceramic scissors and cut away. Okay, now, the other criteria here is going to be, I want to have this on center, so I'm going to measure down there and put a dot, because I can see right in the middle here where the joint is. Now let's just see if we're close. Oh, right on the money. That's never going to happen twice in a lifetime. Now let's see where the clearance is up here. Ha! You need an octo. I was hoping Les could be here today, but unfortunately he's got things he's got to work on. Okay, you can see there's a little bit of a clearance issue there. Right here we need a little clearance. The nice thing about working on these models when they're carbon, another thing you don't see on video, this thing is constantly taking a beating, getting smacked, getting hit with rulers. And you know what? It's never an issue, never a problem. So it's, what happens is you get kind of clumsy, and then when you go to work on something wooden, you just go boink, and it's got a ding in it. So you almost have to have two sets of values. Okay, we're ready to put this in, and I really hope we're going to be close here, because before anything, this has to fit. And we have to have all our clearances here. Boy, I need another set of hands. Ooh, I'm right on the money. Okay. Okay, now with this in place, just going to mark this very carefully from here to here, here to here. As always, what do we do if all else fails? Let's use some more tape. Now, whenever I'm doing over something I want to be able to get the tape off safely, just rub the tape up on your old dirty shirt. Now, I want to put this on this side. This take-apart stuff, if we were doing a Typhoon, if we were doing any plane where we want to have a tape. In fact, some people, Dave Fitzgerald has a take-apart tail on a plane that's got the wing glued in, which is nice. He can change the tail for whatever, Chicky! Dial a date. Actually, what's happening, Chicky, this is the time of year that it's spring. It's, in theory, it's spring. It's still snowing out there. Chicky's looking for a mate. and he thinks I'm his mate. Okay, now that's the part that we're going to be able to use for our hold downs. One of the criteria is we want to get them as far out as possible because that gives us rigidity. But we don't want to, and I'd like to have none right in the middle because it'll interfere with the push rod. So we can lay these out accordingly. 1, 2, 3. 3 is usually the amount that I've used in the past. But I don't want to have them right in the corner because I have that brace. Remember that brace where it's balsa? So that's not going to allow me, quiet, it's not going to allow me to have these right in the corner where I want them. So I'm going to have to move this angle in. Let me get some tape. What? Somebody should sponsor me with tape here. This would work. Let me take the gloves off. Since I've gotten used to working with gloves, I can do almost everything except lay tape down with gloves. Who you talking to, Chickie? I'm the only one in here. You want to take me to the movies? Now this is the amount I don't want to have any further out than this for my bolt pattern. I know, Chickie, I know. It's that time of year, Chick. Should be having baby. Here, this is crappy tape. Okay, now that's the furthest in I want to have the bolts. And now I need to allow the thickness of the dowel when I do my lineup. Now the next thing is to lay out 3 dowels. And again, they're random, really. 3, I think they're 3/8 inch dowels, and I need to drill a hole in the center of them because that's what's going to be the hold downs here. Now what I want to see is, sort of be interesting to see if this is going to work. I was thinking the dowels themselves could be the hold down. I didn't need to put a piece of wood in here. But the advantage would be if I put a piece of wood in here that's flat, I'll get a better fit, a better surface to work off. That just about accounts for that, so I think we're safe. Maybe I should go in even a little bit more here, just the way I'm looking at this. But the next thing is going to be to make the dowels, then put the dowels in place without drilling the holes in here, because then I need to put the wing in and then do all my alignment. And I hope Les is here by then, but if he's not, I'll figure out how to do it. See, I always have a way of doing everything myself, but it's just not fun. It's a lot easier if you have an octopus here to help you. And then I need to, when the tail is in alignment, then drill those 3 holes and then sneak underneath and get the blind nuts in. And then check that I have all my alignments, that this isn't crooked, hinge line to hinge line is straight. I know the one dimension I don't have to deal with is that I'm parallel to the wing. So let's make up those dowels. Making these little features, you need a piece of dowel. This is 3/8 dowel. I cut off pieces already. Now, there's a couple of tricks to this that make it real easy. First off, if you can get these cuts 90 degrees, that's going to be a big help. But there's also a great trick that Jimmy Snyder, when we owned the machine shop, he showed me a great trick, and that is drop the drill on the floor. Try to use a relatively sharp new drill and get it very short. Don't leave the whole drill sticking out. When you're trying to drill through a fine dowel, get it all the way up. Now you have to do it in 2 operations. Quiet! Golly. Now we like to spot this with our little vise. The vise has a little niche that holds it. Let me show this. You can buy these in Home Depot. If you see what it has a little relief, and that allows this to sit 90 degrees. If you try to do this with a pair of pliers, and I have, you'll be using 10 feet of dowel before you get 3 that the hole doesn't come out the side. At least I did anyway. Okay, so the drill is very short, and I just want to spot it now. And of course, if you have a machine shop, you can do it in a lathe, or you can do it with a starter drill. And all this does in the middle, but it's nice if it is. And I'm going as far as the drill will go while it's short. Now, it's not going to be long enough. What I'm going to have to do, of course, is take this out. And believe me, the first time I did this, I really had trouble getting these dowels. I was saying, oh man, God, what a horror. Look at this, I can't even hold the drill. Now, this little trick, of course, makes your whole day complete. The holes are relatively on center, and they don't have to, we're not making a rocket ship to the moon here, but it would be nice if they were relatively on center. Now with the drill long, I can just run it through. I don't even have to hold the vise steady. And I made these plenty long. They're much longer than they have to be. And that's the best way I know of to drill your little drill, the little points with the hole relatively accurate. And the vise is a Home Depot. I think they're about $15. Something good to have if you have a drill press anyway. Handy tool. Now, as you can imagine, I have probably 1,000 pieces of tubing here, but the one piece I need, I don't have. See, this is the right ID, and I can use this to cut the holes. That's the one I had. That one is okay, but now I need the next size bigger tubing, and believe me, I looked through this, there's 1,000 pieces in here, I don't have the piece I need. The reason I wanted the piece was I wanted to show a good trick. I guess I'm going to have to improvise. I thought I was going to be cute, but I guess I'm not. The trick is if you take a piece of factory tubing and you take your dowel and put it right in there, okay, and what you can do is you can put it maybe 2 or 3 drops, just a few drops of CA on there, and then you can sand right up to the tube to get this perfectly flat. That's a nice way to do it. But in case we don't have that way of doing it, the other way is I'm going to put this, chuck this, because I need a flat surface. See, here's what I need. I need to be able this to go right down onto the stab mount. And if these are crooked, well, that's not going to work. So what I'm going to do is chuck these in a drill press and then dress this off so it's nice and straight. If I had the tubing, I wouldn't have to do that. John Pothier just saved our day. What I'm going to do is put these pieces back in that vise, put this in the drill press, and then just run this across. See, here's my point. When I worked in a machine shop, and I really didn't know anything about machine shop work, of course, when I said, not like any of us know anything when we're born. If there is a person born knowing something, I wasn't him. The point is there's always more than one way to do these jobs, and it's good to find various ways and see what way suits you best. Now, a lot of people are really creative. Les, for instance, the part of his brain that likes to make jigs and fixtures and this and that, and I like to learn from Les, but there's always more than one way. There's never a point where you do it this way or it's wrong. There's always the challenge of finding new ways to do it. So let's see if this little tool does what we want it to do. This was a John Pothier tool. He had turned his shaft down so I could run it in a Dremel tool, but being able to put it in the drill press now, it's probably gonna be just as good as doing it with the tubing. You always want to keep the shaft as short as possible. Just to make an example up, if you have a drill, especially a small drill, and you're trying to drill a tiny hole, you don't want to chuck it up here and try to drill a hole. If you're drilling a 16th material, you want only that much of the drill sticking out that it'll go through. Always keeping the shank short, I guess, is the typical machine shop technology. I don't know. When we visit Dub Jet, I'll ask him about it. I want to keep this right in the middle if I can, and just dress it off. Looks like that'll work. Now I'll do both sides right now, so I have flat surfaces to work with. Next thing we have to do, I have to sharpen. See how this tubing is notched? This was used already 1,000 times. So what I do is I put tape over this end of the tubing, and I'll sharpen up this end on my belt sander or grindstone. So I have a way of cutting accurate holes in this, because I don't want these holes to go off I don't want to do it by hand or by eye. What I'm going to do is cut a piece of this tubing up. Eventually, I'm just going to put it in a drill press, make a fixture, putting this tail in place, and then just making my cuts. And that'll ensure that the 3 cuts are straight up and down. And believe me, when you make a flat tail, it's a lot easier because there's more room for error. But with this dihedral thing, there's no room for error. Before I do that next step, I have to bolt the ring in place, and I looked to see how I'm going to be able to get this push rod in, because I have that bottom piece already glued on. And I wanted to see if I could get down through here with an Allen wrench without having to make a hatch out here. And it looks like I'm going to be able to get in through the bottom and get that wheel collar or soldering iron or whatever, but I'm going to need to have some clearance here. So what I decided to do is just change this lightning hole, which is not a big deal. As long as I maintain the hard points here, I think the rest of this is just going along for the ride. That should allow me enough room to get down in there. This thing is in the way here, of course. But if all else fails, when the model is finished, I'll cut this piece out. I really don't know if I want to cut that out right now. Yeah, I better leave it in there for now. It'll add some stability while I'm working on it. I won't be so prone to squeeze it. But in the end, I can just cut it out when the model is finished and I go to hook up the push rod. So that solves another problem that we didn't know we were going to encounter, but, well, you never know when you're going to encounter something here. Okay, now I got to line up that tail. Well, believe it or not, I think we're very lucky. Before I even drill any holes in the tail, what I wanted to check was that everything I've done so far is relatively straight. Boy, it's not off by thickness of a pen line here. I'm getting spoiled, to tell you the truth. Ooh. Whoa. Now the other part, while I have this, I needed to make sure the hinge line is even. Now I need to look at this in this dimension. Oh! Les would be so proud. Okay, this looks like we're going to have this lined up relatively easily, relatively simply. So anyway, the 2 hinge lines are okay. The angle looks really, really close. It's not, you can't adjust it yet because I don't have the dowels in. But if I use this system of just using the dowels, and I'm going to try that first, what that'll allow me to do is just sand one of the dowels to make any final adjustments that I have to make here. In fact, if I press this in position, it's unbelievable. It's really my lucky day. I'm not sure I know if this is a lucky day. I should be playing a lottery. I just temporarily put some tape on this, and I'm going to do this very delicately. I don't want to just punch a hole in here. I sharpened that tubing. This should hold it flat. It's a very straight piece of balsa with an unusually flat piece. And what I thought I'd try to do here is very carefully put these holes in with the dowels. Going through the glass too. Tissue or whatever. Now what's important is that keeps the dowels 90 degrees to our stab insert. I might want to sharpen that tubing after cutting through the fiberglass. But it makes a perfectly nice hole, and our dowels, when I get all 3 of them laid out, the dowels should fit hopefully right in there. Now with these 3 in, now the next step is just to see if the dowels are going to fit the way we hope. If I have to, of course, I can make longer or shorter dowels. And normally, if this were a flat tail, one of the things we do is get this perfectly flat. But because it's on an angle, I want to keep the top of the dowel flat for my screws. I don't want to have an angle and the screw's going to be forced off to one side. I don't want to have any interference with the push rod. The push rod's going to be coming back here, and I want the push rod to run right down the middle without interfering, and I will have to make very sure that that doesn't happen when we make up the push rod. Now we can take this off of this little improvised jig we have. Well, the next thing is I can get these on and just make sure everything's level before I tack glue these in. Next thing is, with this lined up, is to make sure these dowels, they're not glued in yet, that they're all bottomed out on that plywood. That one I have to make a little bit longer. I just have one that's a little too short here for some reason. Make sure they're all bottomed out. We don't have any holes drilled yet. Just want these bottomed out, and then I'll check hinge line to hinge line. Once I'm sure of this, center line to center line, these are all lined up. And I am just going to tack everything. Just the slightest drop of CA on there, just to hold that. We won't know until we actually put some bolts in here. This should hold it tight until I get the bolts in. The system I always use is always tack things down. And if we're a little in some way off, we can add little 64th plywood shims, or we can sand it, but I'd like to get it straight. Okay, they should be tacked in now. They should be tacked in place. I've done what I call, for lack of a better word, a rough alignment here. But now when I'm actually going to drill the holes for the tail, I want to have a fine alignment. I want to do this within a very, very fine tolerance. Now, picture what's happening. Because we have a dihedral angle, measuring up from the hinge lines, if we're even off just an eighth of an inch, that dimension is going to change. In other words, if I were to measure one side of the wing here and one here, I'd be off a quarter of an inch. So I want to measure out a predetermined amount, and I want it to be the thickness of the tail. I want it to be this thickness. So that when I'm actually doing this, I can measure hinge line to a given point here, and not pick up a point, say, an inch out, where it would be further forward. So plus there's another thing that comes into this. Because at a dihedral angle of the tail, we're measuring from way up in the model down toward the wing. So it gets a little more difficult than if you're doing a cardinal, where it's just two straight lines and you try to get the wing and the tail completely parallel. This is a little more difficult. So the first thing I'm going to do is really accurately now, and I really want to do this as accurately as I can. I want to measure the span of the tail, and then come out here and very accurately measure that much of the wing, and then put a mark out here so I know exactly where that's going to go. A lot of times, a little thing like lining these two ends up, again, on a straight, parallel hinge lines, no dihedral or anhedral, very simple, not a big deal. On a thing like this, it can make you crazy if it's wrong. So what I'm going to do is make up a little fixture here, make up a little jig. If all else fails, make up a jig. That's Les's way of doing it. And I think he's right. And what it is, this will be a jig we can use over and over again, because I'm going to have to do this again to Mike's plane. So this is going to be a reference point now, because the nacelles are in the way. See, not only do we have dihedral and anhedral, we have nacelles. So we've got like the worst of all worlds here in an alignment, but we do want to make it really accurate. So this will bring us, I'm guessing this will be well within the range of accuracy that we need. Now this gauge, very simple gauge to make up. You can use balsa wood. We always have balsa wood. This is the span of the tail, where we're going to measure, and now we can measure by the body, and this will go over the nacelle and give us a point on the wing, equidistance out on each side, where we can measure our hinge line to hinge lines and hopefully be accurate. You never realize, you know, I never keep. It just staggers me how many things change when you just induce one extra thing, like dihedral or anhedral, into a project. The whole project gets complicated. It just square roots off the chart, being complicated. So now to use this gauge, I can put this gauge right on the center line of the wing. In fact, I can put it right in on the horn itself. And I can set this piece of tape here. And I know what I'm doing. I can use either the inner part of the tape or the outer part. It won't matter, because I'm on a given spot here. I can either use the two outside parts or the two inner parts. So sometimes just having a simple gauge like this, you don't realize a job that if you don't have the gauge is really difficult. And if this isn't right, then the plane is a lot less fun to fly, because it's always hunting and jiving and doing things it shouldn't do. When it's all aligned, just picture a car. The best way, if you're not a pilot, and I'm only an air-coupe pilot, so I can, you know, limited in this, but picture a car. Well, the wheels are the same tire pressure, everything's in good alignment, and the road is flat. You let go of the steering wheel and it just goes. When a car is crooked, it's in an accident, the tire pressures are all different. This is what you're doing to keep the car from driving off the road. So these alignments, if this is the only thing you pick up off a video, it's worth it. And it's even more critical on a take-apart plane, because if these things aren't tight, if the holes in the dowels are too big, every time you put the plane together, it's different. It's a different plane. We want to make this with enough precision that every time you take it apart and put it back together, it's the same plane. It doesn't need to be retrimmed. Okay, now we have our two critical hard points. Now I took the ruler and made a piece of balsa wood. Just highlighted the end because my eyes are not that good. And I can take this. I know this is the distance it should be if I measure from those 2 points. So I can pretty well measure and set the tail before I drill that first hole. Because once I drill that first hole, I'll only have so much I can move it. Now, the mistake here would be to drill all 3 of the holes, bolt it in, and then you open up the slop in the holes to try to move the tail. Much better idea. Drill 1 hole, put 1 blind nut, and you can still move the tail just a little bit, but you won't be able to move it 1/4 of an inch. You'll only be able to move it maybe a 1/16 or so. Well, we don't even want to be out I always use the word pencil line. I don't know what that means in machinist talk. But right now we are within 1 phone call. Just let me see this, so while I'm on the phone. Yes! Now that we have all of those things in alignment, what I need to do is sharpen up a piece of music wire and spot this back bolt. Once I get the bolt and the blind nut on and just have it hand tight, I'll still be able to move this. But right now it's perfect. And perfect being it's within a pen line of being in this dimension. It's also very close in this dimension. Until I bolt it down, I'm not really going to know. So, before I go any further, getting this first bolt hole spotted with a piece of sharp music wire, and I want it to be a sharp and be the diameter of the hole. I don't want it to be off the half the thickness of the hole, so I'll get a piece of this wire, grind a point on it, and that'll spot me this first hole. And this is just, and it gets hot when you grind it, so I always remember, don't touch the end of it. Now that should start my alignment process. And we have the line. We have our first mark for the drill. The reason I'm doing this is I don't want the drill to walk or wander. I want to use that same exact hole. Well, some people may not believe this, but I was doing this one day and talking on the phone at the same time with and that's a true story, with my hand under there and drilling. I really chewed myself up. Don't do that at home. Always keep your hand out of the way. And when I spot this, now I have like a little funnel shape to work into. Drill it nice and slow. This is a drill size that matches the blind nut, so it should be a real accurate fit. Now what I have to do is get underneath here. I got to cut a hole in this former. Get underneath here with a little stick or something, and get that blind nut in there and just tighten that. Get the blind nut in position next. This is a good thing to do, is I have all the bolts and washers that hold this plane together. This is from the B-25. What I did, as I was making a plane, I made a spare bolt and a spare washer, a whole set of spare bolts. The reason for this is, I watched Paul Walker working on a B-17 one time out in Muncie, and somehow a screw dropped on the ground and whatever. And he couldn't find that screw. It was a screw that was a certain length. He didn't want it longer because it would go in somewhere or whatever the reason was. And he spent a half hour looking for the screw. And I said, oh man. So every time I make a bolt, I'm just going to make the similar thing to this with one of my little prescription bottles and make the A26 bolts. But this is a great little idea for every plane that's even if it's not a take-apart plane. The worst thing is to have a plane with motor mount bolts that are a certain length, so they don't come up through the top block. Now you're at the field, you lose a bolt. You go to put a new bolt in, it's too long, it comes out the top block. How many times do you think I've seen guys do that? A spare little thing of bolts is always, it's going to cost you pennies and give you the security when you're at the field. You're not going to lose a flying day or worse than that, damage the model. Here's the procedure that I use to get a blind nut where I can't really get one. I need to take a piece of wood, piece of scrap wood, get some dust on it and leave the dust on. In this case, let's do this just gently. 1 drop of CA, just very little. We want to hook this on the very edge. Let's just get it in place. Sometimes this takes 9 tries. First, of course, take some oil, put some oil down, and maybe I'll work this with thick CA. Take some little tricky thing you can do. Take some kicker, put it on the nut, and don't get your finger glued to it, which I'm sure I'll do because we're on camera. I just want to catch that nut. It doesn't have to hold it because the bolt itself will hold it. Now let's see if we can get this through here. And can we get it to where we're lined up? Now this can be a little annoying, but like little magic tricks. Sometimes it doesn't work on camera, as he looks furiously for his wrench. See this? He doesn't have the wrench ready. Jeez, unbelievable. No Allen wrench. How do you believe that? Now, the next step on this is going to be, we're going to break this loose. Now we're going to take the bolt out very carefully. Very high-tech. Tighten it good. Back the bolt out. We've now got the blind nut in position where we want it. Now we can take some thick CA. And of course, the trick here is don't get the part glued in place. You can take a Q-tip and swab it in there any way you want to. Just get some CA in there, let that kick. Make sure there's some oil on the threads of the bolt. As soon as that dries, then we'll set the tail in place and we'll be ready to check our alignment and then mark the other places. Okay, the first screw is holding it in. I've got a little bit of variation now. Let me just set the camera up a little bit differently. Now this is what's really critical to me, is before I drill those other two holes, of course, we want to make sure this is right on. See, I still can move this just a little bit, even though that bolt is in there. Okay, and I am right. I'm going to get this so accurate that I'll be impressed. Les will be impressed. Everybody will be impressed. You'll be impressed. This stuff just takes so much time, but boy, the first time you pull out of a wing over, the first time you have that, well, when you see a plane, and a good example is the B-25, you look at any of the flights, you don't have any of this wiggly, snaky stuff. Anyway, we're lined up now. Now the next trick is very carefully spot the second hole, do the same thing, and I'll do that off camera. Recheck it, and if everything's right when the two bolts are in, put the third bolt in, and then of course recheck everything. When I know that's right, boy, we're going to celebrate. Okay, all the bolts and blind nuts are in. We've double-checked every possible alignment that there is in this plane, and everything looks right on the money. And because we've had such a good day, I'm always inclined to quit while I'm ahead. This is the part I like, is when you can pick up the whole plane by the tail. See, this part of the fuselage is so rigid, and this part is just so good. In fact, I think the only thing left tonight that I'm going to do, I'm going to pull this apart, lay out and cut the lightning holes, and call this a great day. Now today what I did, I checked all of the alignments, including the alignment where the stab goes behind the wing. And of course we can fine-tune that by sanding or adjusting the dowels if we have to. I also made up a little tool with a little tang on the back so that every time I go to set this up, you see what this does? It allows me to catch that, and then I measure to my point here, and I know I have it's accurate that way. So having that little tool will be a big help. Anyway, every time I start the day off, I look around at this thing from a lot of different angles, just try to get psyched up to work on it, and every day it gets less and less of a problem to get psyched up and work on it. This is the thing I enjoy a lot, is just walking around and seeing the various shapes that make it, the definitive shapes that make it an A26. And it's really to that point that I get so sick of saying, it's to the point where you get psyched to work on it. There's a passion about it now. Now it isn't just balsa wood pieces and carbon pieces. There's a passion, and when I'm done with breakfast and I have my coffee, I just think of nothing but let's get down there. Let's get a couple hours of modeling in before the phone starts ringing. Why it's important to have a tool like that, or a little jig, or whatever you want to call it, because this tail, by the time we're done, and this plane will be ready to fly, this tail is going on and off 100 times. And I don't want to take any chance in getting it on crooked. Now what happens with a wood aeroplane, it's just like every time you put it on, you really have to check it, because wood moves like the door on your house. You can't close it on a rainy day, you close it on a different day. Well, that really is less with carbon, but I still want to check it. I still don't want to take a chance that, oh well, maybe that's not the case, or maybe it won't work out that way. I don't want to take that chance. I want to always know when I put it on, I put that jig in place, make sure nothing has moved, even to the point where after years of sitting in a jig or something, that something didn't move. It's a cheap insurance that we're always going to have the plane lined up the way it should be. Now, one of the things I found, these edges and corners, if they're balsa wood, if they're carbon or plywood, it's fine. But when they're balsa wood, they don't stand the test of time. Now, this edge and this edge will be fine, but what's going to happen here, this is going to ultimately not leave a nice edge. So what I'm going to do is make a little, just the thickness of the balsa wood of 64th plywood for this whole edge. I want this edge to seat and leave a nice impression so that we'll see two parallel pieces side by side. I may even do the same thing in the back, even though the back is less critical, because it's this front one that you're going to see when you look at the model most, and people are going to pick it up there. But if that's just soft balsa on that edge, it's going to take a beating. I also made up these little 64th plywood hard points, because this is going to bring it out, and this will space it out just the right amount and give me a hard point. So I'll be going from hard plywood, not to soft light ply. Now you can see that piece of plywood edging there. That's really going to add a lot of durability, because again, people pick this up here and they're going to put their thumb right in there, right in where that groove is, and that's balsa wood. They're never going to put their thumb in the carbon, but in that, that'll protect it. Now, any edge that just doesn't have a hard edge like that, ultimately, I'm going to look to put a little thin sliver of 64th plywood in it. It's a good way, and even on edges of cowlings and edges of things, and we're ultimately going to put a 64th plywood edger in to fill it here when we fill in that little gap. 64th plywood edges are your friend. They add almost no weight, and boy, later on in the life of the plane, when that seam seems to withstand the test of time, you're really glad you did it. Again, I keep referring to it, but a lot of the take-apart features on this, you see how I have the ink line kind of fading it in? You almost don't know that it's a take-apart plane. In fact, a lot of people didn't even realize it was a take-apart plane. Some of the seams, even a seam up here. So nice and neat. Oh, it adds a little bit, and even in the back under the flap, it adds a little bit to the look of the plane. So anywhere we think we're going to need that 64th plywood seam, it's worth doing. And this gives us a hard point for the bolts and a nice hard edge. 64th plywood is really a nice hard material, and when that fills in with dope and CA, that'll give us a really nice hard edge. In the back here, we can use a little trick that I learned. What happened, this gap is bigger at the bottom. See it? Let's see if I can focus in on this. See, it's bigger on the bottom than it is on the top by maybe a pencil line. So what I do is just put some little oversized strips of 64th plywood in there, because of course we'll make the top piece separate when we make the block. Here's what I want to do now. See that little gap? Now, I want to keep this edge solid. And I can just fill that gap, that part of the gap, with thick CA as I go along. I can do that with a toothpick, being very careful. Of course, you never want to put thin CA in there. You'll make a one-piece model, and I've unfortunately found that out the hard way. But what you can do is with a toothpick, just get little dots of thick CA in there, and what that does, that sets it in position. Then you can unbolt it and run the CA in there. And that's going to give us the equivalent hard edge. We have that nice tight fit edge that it seems like people in appearance judging, doing the appearance judging, sometimes you can pull one over on them. They don't even know it's a take-apart plane if you've done it right. I can't think of the fellow's name, the guy that was fifth at, was it this year's Nats? Don't even know what Nats it was. Yeah, the fellow from Kiev. That was a take-apart plane. I guarantee you, not many people, unless you asked them. The guy that made his own motor, Constantine. He was at Brodax too. When I looked at that plane and saw the wood fits, it made me jealous. It made me want to upgrade my modeling. What I just put a toothpick in here, and that sets the back edge nice and tight, because this is like a pie shape. Now, and believe me, if you're in doubt, put a piece of wax paper or Teflon in there, but in my case, the reason I don't want the wax paper or Teflon is not because I'm too lazy to put it in there. I want to get that fit without the piece of wax paper if possible. And once this sets up, that should be a perfect seam. Once that's sanded, block sanded out. And it may seem like a lot of the time you put into something like these fits, you just think, oh boy, hour after hour doing this, or day after day. But when you're done, it's forever. It's that thing I keep talking about and trying to convince people like Mike Costello that they don't need quantity in modeling, they need quality. Mike's just one example of somebody I think would benefit more from working on fewer models, but making them more, I guess, higher-end models would be the right word. Now, once it's going to kick by itself, I'll do the other side. When it's dry, I'll take that toothpick out, take this out, trim the top, and then block sand this dimension, and we should have a really, really nice fit. Then the only thing left will be when we make this block. In fact, I can make it before the block. I can make this piece up here so we have one continuous seam. And that top block, which is going to be the hatch we remove to get in at the bolts, and that's kicked off, so this, we can take the toothpick out. Oh, no, it's not really kicked out. Really, see, I really do want to keep that tight. But we'll just wait till it kicks off. Now when it's apart like this, I can trim the top of these off and then run a thin glue seam down here just to fill in that gap, because this plywood has made up for the difference. And it's a lot easier to do it this way, I think. I'm going to kill this bird. Hey! It's a lot easier to do it this way, I think, than to be grinding away at everything and trying to match edges. And this works especially well on a cowling. And what plane, not many planes anyway, don't have a cowling. So this is good technology, good tricks, good tips you can use no matter what plane you build, and even an Nobler. Any edge we're going to work on, if we can get a hard edge in there somehow, it'll just be one of the things that'll add a little quality to the model, I hope. Now you got all the edges up and across. I think that was a major, major upgrade. And when you run your finger over here, and you'll say you can't even feel the joint completely disappeared. So that was one thing we needed to do. And I kept thinking about getting in at that push rod and what a pain in the neck that's going to be. So I cut that piece out. Didn't seem to matter at all. This back of the fuselage is still plenty solid. And some of these things you got to kind of invent as you go along. You got to, in other words, you don't know how strong this is going to be, but because you have 2/8 plywoods bolted together, well, once it's together, you can take quite a bit of the material away. And I think that's one of the things on a B-25. I way overbuilt this part of it. Totally unnecessary, but hey, that's the learning curve you go through when you're breaking new ground in modeling. And since I'm trying to picture how many bombers have ever been built in the history of stunt, well, probably could count it on one hand. How many people had to go through this evolution, and not many have had carbon fiber bodies, if any at all. So we're really trying to break new ground and trying to see how this is going to all work out. But so far, I just couldn't be happier. So today John DeTavio was going to come over and do some custom work in our shop and up in the house. And if you've never seen John DeTavio work, you're in for a treat. He's a special guy. Guys that do this kind of work, they like to work barefoot. They feel that the odor of a wet sock is preferable to smelling windy BO. Look at this. Look at what this guy, look at what he's doing in my house! Oh, jeez, what are you putting, plumbing in here? Actually, what he's doing, the rug has over 15 years or 10 years, the rug has a lot of wrinkles, so he's going to stretch the carpet. And this is really a carbon fiber push rod here. Is that what this is, John? Sure we can't make one of these and make some real money instead of this model airplane money? Oh, man.
Here we go.
All right. I showed John my custom tile job. He was not impressed. So listen, if things get slow, would you hire me, John?
Huh?
You think the company will hire me there to lay some tile?
Oh, sure.
I don't think so. Not when they see how long it took me to do that. Oh my God, I could have pulled the Titanic off the ocean floor in the time it took me to do that. So what do you do with this? How does this thing work? Show me the hot trick here.
What's that?
How are you doing this? I never saw you do this before.
No, with the power strip.
John and I did a lot of carpet jobs together, rip-up jobs. We didn't put the carpet in, we ripped it. That's where those tables we had, those glass tables come from. Where was that, on 54th Street we got all those tables?
57.
Oh, I remember taking those glasses. Okay, here you go. Now he's got the high windy belt crank at one end here. Look at how that pipe is going against the beam of the house, probably the molding of the house. Watch that archway collapse over there. Oh, man.
Hooked up, which one is it?
Uh-oh. I told you, carbon fiber is the answer, baby. Look how that pulls the carpet up. That's amazing.
Here's it.
You got 2 inches out of the length of the carpet already. Wow.
More.
Well, either that or you're making the house longer. Maybe the house just got an inch longer. Look at this tool. Did you ever see a tool like this?
Yeah.
Holy mackerel. That's an amazing piece of equipment.
Oh, I did power stretchers. It's unreal. You couldn't trick that out with the what's called.
I was wondering how you were going to do this. I mean, I seen you put a lot of carpet in, but this was going to be an amazing...
Yeah.
When I see this, I'll be impressed. Do I get a new piece of that stripping? Are you going to use the old one over, or?
Well, we could put the old one back. We'll have to go to Home Depot to get a new one.
No, I'll clean it. Just if you can pull it up without denting it, I'll polish it up, clean it up, or whatever. I don't feel like spending any money on this job.
Well, it's cheap anyway.
No, I know.
Normally, I would have some in the truck.
No, that's the least part of the whole job. It's stretching the rug I need you for. Look how much that's, I'm amazed how you got at least 2 inches there, right?
Yeah, that's the first bite.
Wow.
We're gonna take
Amazing.
another one.
Wow. No wonder you're such a good modeler. Well, Niebuhr said you don't know much about installing carpeting. He's wrong. So when you see John down a flying field burning in those 550 fancy score patterns, you'll know what a phony he is. What a phony. We don't make much money, but boy, we sure have a lot of fun. Lately, we haven't been having any fun or making money, though.
Hey, nobody. At least we get to have fun with George Ventrini.
Oh, man. Yeah,
Nobody had George.
George is looking good. I gotta give him credit.
Oh, I'm really mad because now I'm coming across, see?
Okay, yeah, I see how much this is how much this stretched in, how many years? 10 years? I don't know, 12 years?
Yeah, so he didn't say.
It's an amazing tool. I'm still impressed with how this tool works. Of course, my house is changing shape here. What do you think these dolls are thinking what's going on here? All these Brodak, the dolls from Brodak. Dolls everywhere here. You better watch it, John. They're checking your feet out. They're thinking, man, for an old guy, this guy's got sex appeal. Wow. That's still the wires from Christmas to turn the lights in the windows on. We didn't take them down yet, thanks to this operation. You can see what's happened. Bomber production has gone into slow motion over here. Paybacks. They say paybacks are well, we can't say on video. But we're going to fix this body. This body is broken all the way down. This is going to be my little payback for John's carpet job. And it looks like we got wheel pants need to be fixed. And I'm not sure what else, but we're going to see if we can polish up the paint here. Yeah, that's just with spit. We can see what's underneath that. Give you an idea of what's going on here. Anyway, it's going to be, it's a plane that has again, we had a lot of fun with this years ago, testing tuned pipes when everybody thought other people were the first ones. We really were one of the first ones. And little known fact, Richie Tower did do a lot of the development work. And I got to fly this plane until I was sick of flying it, to be honest. So we're going to spend the rest of the day, now that we have the carpeting and some other things straightened out. And the other thing we may be able to do is John's going to try to scrape off this paint that's in here. We're going to try to put some tile in here in the next couple of days, but more of that when it comes. In the meantime, next job is going to be to try to get this repaired. 5-minute epoxy here for this quick fix. John's Quick Fix at a Month Club. We have a beautiful flying day, so what are we doing? Repairing planes. Okay. Just get this in here. You just hold it at that spot.
I will. You brush it in.
I've done this before, John.
Yeah, I think you have. On numerous occasions.
You're in good hands here.
Okay, on numerous occasions.
You know how you stretch that rug?
Yep.
That's how I put the planes back together.
I tell you.
Karen's gonna be so happy when she comes home. Jeez. She may be a very happy girl. Okay, just get tail up. Let me get some in there. We're gonna get this puppy back in the air. A lot of good memories. Boy, Richie when he built this, he had great expectations, but then reality set in.
Tail heavy.
Tail heavy, yeah. This was tail heavy.
It sure was. He pushed the gear right up into the wing.
He never wanted to fly because he flew it and it was hard to fly. It was hard to land even.
Yeah, yeah.
Put it back the way it was.
Okay. It was tail heavy as hell.
All right, put it back to where you think it should be. Rid of this. All right, squeeze it. Just hold it. There you go. Yeah, you got it. Let me get a little alcohol.
That'll squeeze it right out of the...
Just hold it.
I'm holding it.
I'll get a little alcohol.
How you doing? Let's go.
Tricky. You don't have to worry about the paint on this plane. What is it, 30 years old? 25? 82.
82 he built this?
No, 87.
87.
I had that wrong the first time too, because Lincoln was 82 and 87. Now, you got it? We're going to need your muscles for the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, all right. I've got it. I'm squeezing it together.
Squeeze-o-matic. Richie is still shooting guns in that organization that West belongs to, the gun.
Yeah, he said
The
that.
shotgun guys or shotgun club or whatever it is. Wes sees them. Yeah.
I'll be
They're
there.
still shooting guns. Okay, now just keep that faith.
I'm holding it.
Keep it the faith. It gets high tech from this point on. Chicky. I'm not kidding, Chicky. Well, you must have fleas in your ears or something. He likes those ears. Okay, now I gotta stretch these, so that one's done.
Okay.
Yeah. Every time you do this, though. It's so high tech, John. Telling you. I'm telling you, baby. But this thing really has a history. It's an amazing thing.
Yep.
We were testing more tuned pipes, and they finally gave up on this, and we had the Killer B. And he didn't want to fly the Killer B either. Oh, that's too big, huh? This thing was harder to fly than the Killer B. But the Tiger 60 cures all problems.
Oh, man, I'll tell you. I put that Tiger in this, I couldn't believe it. I took it down to the field.
Yep.
And the first flight, I said, holy goodness.
Geeski liked it?
Man.
Now pick the tail up.
He said, "Jesus Christ, boy, that airplane really flies good." He said, "I like that wing." He said, "You know, he's coming good drooling over it."
Yeah. Okay, hold it now. Let's get this.
Now you drool over your Cardinal sin. He loved that airplane.
You let him fly it?
Huh? Yeah.
He said he liked it. He told me that, too.
Yeah, he told you you should build more. Well, when I bring it back, we'll fix it up.
Bring it, we'll fix it.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing is unfixable. At our age, what are we living for?
Yeah, that airplane flew great. That's it? Take the hold it?
No, that. You just hold it till I'm done.
Okay.
I don't want oil getting in that seam.
Yeah.
See, I'm stretching the tape like a rubber band.
Yeah.
Just stop. And while we're doing this, we can polish up the wing, and we're working on wheel pants. There's the last of the crack going away right now. Pick it up if you can. Well, this is where it's a problem, is right under the tail. You don't want oil getting in there.
Yeah.
Especially if it's a Tiger 60, it's going to have
Well,
You know, you gotta clean it once in a while. These modern guys, they don't know you have to clean. They should buy a Fox 35 with no muffler. Remember that old days? Your towels. I remember.
oh, towels all over the place.
Oh, God.
That was a ritual.
Okay, that's good.
All right.
Let's see if you got...
Should be pretty neutral.
No, I want to see if it's straight. Straight as an arrow.
Oh, yeah.
Straight as an arrow.
The way you slice it.
I'm gonna double the price. Like with each passing day here, we're doing more nostalgia things and rebuilding old things from the old days. Now that's going to dry. While that's drying, we're going to use M600 to clean up the wing. There's a couple of spots here. Basically, they're broken, but I want to fuel-proof them. So what I want to get all this stuff off with M600, clean it up as much as we can, and then we'll try to just seal that with, well, probably epoxy is the best, just so oil doesn't get in there. It up, right? Mm-hmm. Just loosen it up. See, this is Imron. He did this with Imron. Just like tradition. So what you can do is, even alcohol will work on that, M600, anything, just clean it and clean it with a paper towel so it's clean. So any little repairs we make, they're going to get a good bond. There's about 8-10 little spots we need to touch up on this. Anytime you want to get off, in this case, we want to get off this 10,000-year-old hinge line tape. And if it's not coming up, or if it looks like it's pulling paint up, a great John Brodak tip, just hit it with a little bit of heat. See, it's not coming up. Hit it with a little bit of heat. It'll come right up. It'll almost come off by itself. I don't know if that thing's going to be long enough.
Well,
once you heat that even a little bit, John, it usually comes right up without taking the paint off. Even if you're doing a trim on a plane, it's such a great trick. Look at that. 20-year-old tape coming right off. Just keep it nice and hot. Keep it right to the head of the gun. We're going to put fresh hinge line tape on, of course. That new tape worked great. Now, I remember even back to '87 when we were trimming this plane, how it was critical to have the hinge lines taped. It's a relatively thin wing plane. If you grab it here, it's like a plane that if it were 10 ounces light, it would just be a killer. But there's not many things a Super Tiger 60 can't cure in terms of, well, we can weigh it later when you put the motor in it.
Yeah.
All right, you can take that tape off the back of the body and let's start polishing that body up.
okay.
You got the motor here?
Yeah.
You got all the hardware and everything?
Yep.
Okay. Fabulous. First part is, remember how the old windy adage, save all the pieces? If we had this piece, this would be so much easier. Now I'm going to have to glass this side, fill this in with air epoxy light. So I'm going to mix up some air epoxy light here and get a little fiberglass going while John puts the motor in here. And I don't know, he seems like a one unhappy customer here, John. We could be, actually, it's a flying day and we're spending it doing this. Unbelievable. No wonder we don't rule the world. It's as simple as that. Get the first layers of glass cloth on these wheel pants. That, of course, has to dry before we can sand it out. In here, we'll fill this in with air epoxy light. And I'll make a little piece of fiberglass for over here, and then we'll have a chance, once this all dries up, to sand it down and probably just repaint the wheel pants at some future time. Well, Bada Bing looks for the last half hour for a 632 washer.
I got it.
Hakuna Matata, be prepared.
Well, I thought I had them in here, but I might have grabbed the wrong little box with the stuff.
I don't know. Usually it takes me an hour to find a 632 washer, too. Don't feel bad. It's kind of sloppy, but if we get a chance, we'll sand that all down now. John's got the motor, and actually, we could actually go out and run it, but too nice of a day. We actually should have went flying today. He's got the cowling somewhere, and I think he's got a spinner. And because this was always tail heavy, I think we're going to need a spinner and a nose weight, but we'll see come the weekend. It's supposed to be a nice flyable weekend. Looking forward to flying this after, what, 87, 97? Wow, it's like a 17 or 16-year-old plane, I'm not sure. John's not impressed with my floor finishing technique here. Holy mackerel. I can't wait to have a nice workshop. Maybe my construction will get better. That's coming right up, huh?
Right.
Now what do? You have to put etch on that too?
Now what I do is then I flash it. I got the compound
It's epoxy?
No.
The stuff we used at Niehaus Avenue?
Huh? No, it's just regular, attached right to the concrete.
Oh, okay.
And I'll feather it nice and smooth, we'll get it nice and smooth, and then we'll glue it. Then when that dries, we'll put the glue on, put tile on.
All right. I don't care what neither says about you. You're okay. All right, when I get back from the he's doing this while I'm going for a haircut. You may get 2 dinners tonight. I don't know. This could get to be expensive. I don't know if I can afford this. We basically have just shut down Varma production for the rest of our life here as the crowd gathers to see what John's up to. Okay, John. Oh, look at this. We're going to have a nice floor in here for a change. Wow. I'm telling you, this is going to work well. How long does it take to set up, John?
Not too long.
Okay.
In the high spots, we'll take a little longer. The deep well, see, like here.
Yeah, but this is chemical set?
Yeah, it's chemical set, yeah.
Okay. Well, we can leave that back door open. I can lock this door.
Yeah, we're gonna leave it open.
No problem. Leave the fan on and everything.
Yeah, I'll make it dry quicker.
We have the incline things at is Rich is going to demonstrate very soon how the white ink on the Stuka.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to do this white ink? Are we going to see this?
I'm gonna
Okay.
try.
And you got the videotape? So this should be a perfect job.
Almost.
Matt Newman, you're in big trouble, baby. What does this have to dry? 2 hours now?
Well, it's dry. It's dry enough now to where we can put the second coat on it.
All right, so John's going to put the second coat. You going to stay and do this tonight?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, if it's
right.
enough.
I got enough beer in the refrigerator.
If it don't, we'll do it tomorrow.
Okay, either way is okay. Yeah, you can make a coat is just like sanding sealer. Is that the whole deal, John?
No, it's second coat. Finishes off.
But is it the same material?
Yeah, same material. The only thing is, this gives you that filler coat on it now to take care of all of the
Little divots and stuff, yeah.
all the little spots that you missed the first time around.
Now with the heat on, we turn the heat up.
They'll dry fast.
All right.
It's a thin coat anyway.
While you have that out, we could do Jack of Bones play. Oh boy, am I sick. Well, the wheel pant, the red letter's drying on that. We got one wheel pant half fixed. This part came out repaired. This we haven't touched yet. We got an engine in there already. And here's John's cowling. We call it cowling in a bag. Save the pieces. Bada bing didn't save the piece. There's one piece missing.
That's in the truck.
Oh, no, no.
You know who broke that all up? Mike, the guy that's working with me.
Ah.
He is the nosiest bastard. He goes through that truck. I know what that.
He knows you got money.
He robbed me of the change.
Ah. Getting the center line down. He's decided to tough it out and stay until his job is done. One way or another.
That's right.
Live free or die.
We don't
Or
deserve
die.
it. We don't deserve it.
Here's his salary. You give him one, you think a used flat Coke.
There you go. Right, okay.
Is that how you trim your plane, with a snap line? Like putting the glue on. Oh, I love the smell of that glue, John. I'm telling you. Brodak glue. Is the outside door shut? Too late now.
No. You don't want to shut him out.
No, okay.
Turn it out that way.
Okay, I didn't know.
No. Leave it alone. Just wait.
You got me all confused.
No, this.
Aren't they? What is that, industrial stuff, John?
1/8. 1/8 thick.
Yeah, pretty thick.
But I get these laid out.
So you're working off that center line going to the door, right?
Yeah, I'm staying right on it.
That's how I did that job upstairs.
Yeah, I'm gonna stay right on that line as much as I can.
I've been buying those John DeTavio how to lay tile videos. You're doing them a lot quicker than I would, baby.
You know, you make a cold cut like this.
But then I do brain surgery a lot quicker than you.
Yeah, I guess you do.
Isn't it on this already, huh?
Yeah.
I feel like I work in a hospital. I may have to do higher quality work now to justify this, the tremendous expense of doing this job. Wow, that looks pretty cool. No, you really don't think about this, but it's one of the reasons I like to do little variations of what goes on in my life, beside modeling. We certainly don't have a one-dimension life. But having a nice shop to work in, and I'm in this shop sometimes 14 hours a day, and sometimes longer even, and last night was one of them, when John and I finished this. But here's the point, and it's a very valid point. Once you're done with a project like this that you've been putting off for 10 years, boy, it's such a good feeling. You come down in the morning, here's your cup of coffee. First thing this morning, the phone rings. It's Rich Oliver. The motors are in the mail. We should have them tomorrow. That'll certainly be worth, especially with the weather breaking the way it is. We have a couple of warm days this week. Having a nice clean floor to work on changes everything. Well, what really changes now is we're getting back to working on a bomber after whatever delay it is, it's an investment. Now, at this point in time, and this is one of the things of all modeling projects like this, I have to decide, I have to look at the jobs that are left and try to put them in a sequence that makes sense to me. As an example is, I can take the fuselage off here, and I was thinking what I should do, because I only need the fuselage then to do it. I can make this piece that's going to go back here, the tail cone and the rudder. I have to make the other pan and the hatch that's going to allow me to get in here, and the nose piece and the hatch that's going to allow me to get the nose wheel and the nose cone. But now that I know I'm going to have the motors soon, and we were not sure when the motors were coming, then I could be working on a fuselage as one unit, and the wing unit can be on the other bench, because I'm going to have to do all the plumbing, and I'm obviously going to make some carbon tanks. I have to make all the cutouts, and then I got to get what I think I'm going to have to start looking around for an air conditioner. I can make those scale mufflers, and Scott Dinger has agreed to make a set of mufflers for this project. So I start out each day not only with coffee, of course, but one of the things that I really want to start off thinking is, what's the next step here? What do I want to do next? And as an example, I try to always allow that if Les is here, he can use the big table, because I only need the big table from time to time. I'm comfortable working on the smaller tables. And his projects, we really are trying to get his projects moving along, but because of his mom's health, of course, it's an issue for him. So we're going to start out, and I guess just after thinking about this and having a half a cup of coffee, I think we'll start working on this back area. I can take the fuselage off and do a step-by-step. Now, making this little piece, it seems like, oh, no big deal, and it's done. Well, no, this piece requires a lot of fits, a lot of cuts, a lot of angles, a lot of fooling around goes back here. The other requirement is that it be as light as possible and solid. We don't want to have a hatch back here flapping around, or that oil is going to get inside. So this is going to be a little more labor intensive than it looks, but it's one of the things of all take-apart planes, being able to make this hatch up, or this piece, whether it's a top-loading piece or a bottom-loader. You still need to be able to get the push rod in, and I ran an arrow shaft in there, and it looks like there'll be no problem with clearance all the way down for the push rod. And because it's very far back in the plane, I want it to be as light as possible. I don't want to have something back here that's a big unhollow block or a big glob of epoxy or something. Is we have the video of making this take-apart system. We have the video of making the Typhoon, the take-apart system. And we have the video of this, of course, and of the Miss Ashley that we no longer have. So we've got plenty of data to draw on in the database. Let's get started making that part up. When making up this piece usually is a little more intense than you really anticipate it to be, but I'm going to start with the first part of this is I need to make a bulkhead, or a piece. I'll use 1/8" light ply because I want to keep it a relatively nice fit here. I'll probably ultimately line it with 64th plywood, but the first piece would be to cut this piece out, make a paper pattern, and then start from there, and then work my way back. Now, of course, I have just a piece of scrap balsa, and I can just use this to make up my rough pattern here. This, of course, will be a taper. And it'll have that half curve eventually, but we'll worry about that later. Whoops, well, we know that's a straight line. We just need to make this piece rough and simulate that whole outside curve and leave a little room here because I think ultimately we're going to wind up putting, and we won't do it yet, put our pin or some way of locating this right about here. I've made up a pseudo little pattern for this. I need to account for this little piece. I need to account for where the parting line is going to be. This is going to be the parting line going all the way around. It's going to end here. This whole piece is going to come off, so I need to know now where the end of this is going to be. And then the height, once I account for that, will probably be, well, we'll put a block on there. Something about that height. So again, first make a pattern, then use it up on, make it up, I have to make both sides of course, accounting for this, figuring where my parting line is going to be. Top will be a block, and then I have to figure out how I'm going to attach this. Now normally you would, there's several choices. You could put one bolt holding it in this position. We can put a bolt down. Again, we're going to think about it. Give me a little time while I'm waking this little part up. There's one of those little parts that it looks like it goes in an hour, and it usually takes a whole day to make it. But when it's done, it gives you complete access to the control system, lets you get in here and check bolts that may or may not loosen up in time. And if you ever want to disassemble a model and just store it somewhere without having this giant, in my case, I'm running out of house. Now once I'm kind of satisfied with the fit of this piece, I'm guessing that's going to be okay. Oh, we got a high spot there. I got to account for that angle. Another 64th of an inch. See, I'm trying to get this, that when this piece rests on the stab, that this piece will rest on the bottom here at the same time. Just need to take a little more material off. The two sides made up, and I referenced them because they're just slightly different. Two little dots. This will go on this side. I wanted to keep nice tight clearances if possible. This one dot equals the one bolt. Now we're ready to glue these two into position, but before I did that, I want to have a reference. I want to have this piece keyed into this, and I thought, since I don't know if I'm going to use a bolt to attach this or a pin, I could drill an 1/8 inch hole and just for now put a little pin, put a little piece of tubing in there or whatever. So I can reference this off as to where I want to put this. Right about here would be a good choice. And I can drill both parts at once. This would probably be fine. And if I have to, I can put a little brass eyelet in there even. And what I want to try to do is I make sure I have a little bit of extra material around the whole surface so I can grind this in eventually. And this will give me the choice of having a bolt or a pin at some point in time. This will just keep this in alignment while I'm gluing all these parts that go in the back. Decided to do after drilling this. I didn't want it to be this high because it will happen, it's in the balsa wood. I figured it'd be better off in a light play. So I'll just fill these little parts up with a little piece of scrap. But now I'll have a pin, I can put a piece of aluminum tubing is even okay there. Any kind of tubing. Just that'll be a keyway that'll hold that part in place. After thinking about this for a lot of times, here's one of the problems. If I were to use a pin in here, I need to slide this in and this little piece catches. So, and I thought another thing, because this is so thin in the back, this would add some rigidity. If I get a bolt here and a bolt here, I'll have two bolts holding this tail section, just make for a little more rigidity. Because remember, this part of the fuselage is absolutely rock solid. There'll be no bending up there going on at all. So back here, I don't want to have it that it starts bending back here and then there'll be a stress riser here. This will kind of spread the load, I hope. Anyway, next step is going to be to tack glue the two pieces on. I've got this edge kind of happy, and I'll be even with the end, and then I need to figure out my block and the little tail cone block, and then how I want to attach it in the back. Now, just like anything else, fitting these parts on, I don't want to have any chance that thin CA is going to get anywhere here. So I'm doing everything with thick CA. Keep that alignment. I don't want to have any glue get down in here and attach anything. Nice thing about the thick CA, it gives you a second or two to work too. It only takes one drop of that stuff to get in there and make a real nice headache for you. So the next thing is to figure out this former thickness back here and just make a little cross grain piece of, I guess, 3/32 or 1/8 just to frame this out. The fillets are going to cover this, so I'm not really concerned about that joint as much as getting these parallel and getting this that the fits along here are nice. Make sure we have the thickness here right, even though this piece eventually is probably going to get all ground away. We need a little piece in here just to hold that together. Now with that little piece in place, and it's the next step on this is to account for the taper of the fuselage, which we can't have the block go down to nothing on this angle if you looked at it from the side. So we want to kind of account for that angle. I guess the easiest way is just lop off a piece of this with a knife. Right about here is where it starts curving. Right about there. Can go even a little lower than that. We can get rid of this material right now because that'll interfere with the block. Have that piece all trimmed off. Again, each time I install this, I like to get an idea how that's going to snap in place. And I think the easiest thing right now is to just lay out the block. Let's see what we want to do. I guess I can do it off. I can rough out the block without even having this attached. Now the next thing I have to account for, the angle on the front. That'll be plenty big. A little bit of belt sander, get this angle in here, and then I can tack glue this block in place. And then we'll be ready to get it in position. And there, Chickie's having fun again. Quiet, Chickie! To make a little trough right down the middle here, otherwise I'm not going to be able to get the bolt in position, and I want to do the final carving once that's in position, so I need to make a hole back here, get some of this material out here so I'll be able to get the bolt in and out. And with that trough cut, we'll be ready to glue this in position, tack glue this on, and do our rough cutting. We can rough this out before we even put it on the model. Now I'm just trying to get a rough idea of how much of this I want to take off. Just rough cut all these angles and edges before I actually bolt it on and then try to get the final contours here, because then the next thing is going to be what amounts to be a little tail cone block. Now to get my profile right on this, and I got to really watch this, because I got to carve this block in the back. That's one of the next things, but I can remove this material, just knife it right off, or take it off on a belt sander before I even start putting that curve in. Now with this rough, then I can just kind of get some of my angles close. So we got that. I had to make a tool. In fact, let me show it. This was a piece of tubing soldered to an Allen wrench just so I can get in and get that bolt temporarily anyway. I'll probably put a little piece back here so I don't need the long wrench. But for right now, I didn't want to commit to anything like that. Now, I don't have any way of supporting this in the back, so I'm going to try to just rough this in. And unfortunately, we're coming up on the end of this tape, and I hope that the information on these last two tapes will help anybody that's looking to get some information on making a take apart. This is the way I've done the last 6 or 7 of them, or 5, I don't even know. Seems to be a very doable way, a very easy way, and a very reliable way. But for sure there are other ways. Now once I get this roughed out, then I'll take it off, get a final sanding on it. And the next step is going to be to make up that little block. If you look at how an 826 is in the back, it's got kind of a definitive little point back there. Anyway, there we go. We'll have to get that curve, and I'll have to get that off the plans. Step is to hollow this part out. I gotta get the phone. Cut the block off and hollow that out. Now again, this is ready to be hollowed out. We'll scoop and hollow this out. Then we'll be ready to put this back on permanently. Once this is on permanently, now I'll have the choice of putting my wrench access in there, because I didn't want to go through this solid block. It just would have got messy. And then I need to figure out this last little shape, which is I've been looking at it from several different angles, this tail, this little blister kind of thing that's going on here. Luckily, we have plenty of documentation, plenty of the various, and again, here's what it looks like. From one view, it almost looks asymmetrical, and from some views, some of the early ones, it looks symmetrical. So we're going to have a lot of choices here, and that block will be the next thing that goes on after this is hollowed out. Making sure I get every little bit of material out of this little canoe here. The simple reason that this part is very far from the CG, and I really don't want to have it even a couple of grams heavier than it has to be. I want to get a nice edge because I need the parting line right along that seam, if possible. Okay, so the next thing I'll do is I'll tack these two blocks on and try to get this just roughed out in the rough shape I want it to be. The trick is I want to make sure I got a nice fit here. A 90-degree fit here, because that's going to be my parting line when I'm all done with it. I want to be able to part that seam right down the middle. Now with everything tacked in, this is relatively solid. What I need to do is just get this into rough shape. Just get the rough outline shape that I'm looking for off of the rudder drawing. Just to rough this out, I made it purposely oversized because that the drawing has a little bit of an asymmetrical curve to it. I want to try to replicate that if I can. It would just be the easiest way rather than trying to make the block the exact size. I can get the curve in after I get all the little tapers going in this direction. Because this is going to have a curve down and back, kind of a hook look. Now with that piece carved, it's not hollowed out, of course. What I need to do is, before I go any further, I want to make a hatch here. I'm trying to picture how I want to do this. Because I want to be able to get in at that bolt. So maybe I can do this very conveniently. Now what I want to do is see if this will, I see I'm going in there to attach this. In fact, it's at the wrong angle. I need to make less of an angle here. And the only purpose of this hatch, this is going to be so I can get in to line this up with the bolt, and I'll be able to get in with the Allen wrench here. This way you won't see the bolt hole from the top of the plane. A small piece of tubing and insert it there. That'll protect the wrench from chewing that up on the finished part. This has really worked out well. That controls that screw. Kind of acts as a little bit of a guide, I guess, too. Now I can take this section off. You can see how that looks from inside. I'm going to glue that permanently now. Dress this off, and then this little piece has to get attached to the top. Part is hollowed out. Now I just put a piece of 64th plywood on there to make an edge so that I can work off that edge. And now, of course, I'll Dremel it all off even, but the problem is we're getting right near the end of the tape, and I don't want to be right in the middle of grinding or drilling or something and not be able to finish it. But that's basically where we're going to end this tape. We still have to put the other side on, hollow the other part out, and maybe, and I don't know for sure, put another blind nut in there. I'm not sure. So I put this piece of 64th plywood on here just to have an edge. I wanted to put the tail in next and then see if, just right at the end of the tape, if I can figure this little piece out. That'll be the end of this. See if I'm going to need a piece on the bottom of that. But the only way I'm going to get that fit is with the tail in place. So the next thing I had to do is make some clearance for the horn. When the horn was in its full throw, I had to take some of that material away before I could even get the tail in and have the horn move the whole throw. That gives me plenty of clearance now for the horn. Now the final thing is, because we've added a 64th and a 64th, where we will add, this part is now going to be thicker, so I've got to take some of the material away to make sure that can still sit back down without being up a 32nd of an inch. So that's the amount of material I have to sand off so that I can get that, make up for the fact that we have the pieces of plywood in there. Oh, look, a little boat or something. Now once the glue dries on that, that's the second edge. And it's trimmed and all sanded out. Well, those plywood edges, when you make them, having these edges for the paint lines and everything, when you get all done with it, if they're nice and tight, all these seams and edges, what happens, it'll look like ink lines when it's done. But I still have to decide, when this is all done, whether I need an extra bolt back here or not, or if one bolt is going to hold that on. Once that's all dry and sanded out, quiet bird. So we hope we'll see you on the next video. We're going to sand this out, work on it, try to get these edges fit a little better.